The Texas sun was merciless that afternoon, hanging like a brand over the empty land. Heat shimmered off the cracked two-lane road, warping the horizon into waves. Jack Reynolds gripped the steering wheel of his battered Jeep with one hand, the other brushing sweat from his temple. His camouflage shirt stuck to his back, heavy with dust and memory. He had seen silence in war zones before, but this was different. It was the kind of quiet that felt like a breath held too long. Then, a black smear appeared on the roadside ahead. At first, Jack thought it was just roadside debris, a tattered blanket, maybe a forgotten bag. But as his Jeep rolled closer, something in his chest went cold. The dark shape wasn't still. It trembled, and circling above, slow and silent, were vultures. He hit the brakes. The tires shrieked against the gravel, sending a plume of hot dust into the air. Jack stared through the windshield, not at the vultures, at what they circled. A dog. No, a puppy. So small it barely seemed alive. Its limbs were curled unnaturally, ribs jutting through skin too thin to hide the outline of bones. Its fur was a grim blend of mud, ash, and dried blood, stiff with neglect. One of its back legs was twisted at a sickening angle, and it was breathing. Barely. Jack stepped out, the heat hitting him like a wall. But he didn't notice. His eyes locked on the puppy, then on the vultures. 5 of them. One bold enough to lower its wings and take a step forward. Jack reached instinctively for the baton in the back of the Jeep. His soldier reflexes hadn't dulled, but this wasn't a battlefield, not one anyone else would care about. Still, to Jack, this was a front line. He moved slowly, eyes narrowing. Not today, he muttered. The largest vulture hissed, but didn't retreat. It watched him, black eyes full of hunger and challenge. But Jack didn't break stride. He approached the tiny body like he might approach a wounded comrade, with reverence, with purpose, with a knot in his throat. He knelt beside the dog. The smell hit him first. Sun-baked filth, old wounds, something sour and wrong. But under that, there was a faint breath, a pulse, a life that hadn't yet given up. Jack reached out and touched the puppy's chest. Beneath the fur, the skin was hot, feverish, the heartbeat fluttering like a broken wing. The dog didn't flinch, didn't react. It was too far gone for fear. Then something shifted. The puppy let out the faintest sound. Not a cry, not a bark, just a sigh. As if it had been waiting for someone. As if being noticed finally was enough to let go. But Jack wouldn't let it. He shifted the hind leg gently. There, barely visible under the grime, was a string of numbers tattooed into the skin. Military ink. His own blood chilled. K9, he whispered. Not just any dog. A trained one, or at least one bred for it. And this was how they'd discarded it? Left it for vultures? Jack's jaw clenched. He stripped off his outer shirt, wrapping it around the trembling body like a cocoon. The puppy didn't resist, didn't even whimper, just laid its head into the cloth like it had already made peace with vanishing. But Jack hadn't. He stood, the bundle cradled in his arms. The vultures watched, unmoving. "You don't get this one," he growled. "Not today." He turned toward the Jeep. The wind picked up behind him, dry, sharp, like the edge of something broken. And as he placed the fragile life onto the passenger seat, adjusting the vents to blow cooling air, Jack made a silent vow. He didn't know if the puppy would survive, but he wasn't going to let it die alone. The Jeep's engine groaned as Jack hit the accelerator, kicking up another trail of dust behind them. The road ahead was endless, stretched taut beneath the weight of heat and urgency. Jack's fingers gripped the wheel tight enough to turn his knuckles white. Every few seconds, His gaze darted to the passenger seat. The puppy hadn't moved. Its small chest rose and fell, each breath a struggle. Jack had seen men cling to life with less. But there was something almost too quiet about this creature. Not just in its body, but in its spirit. Like it had already walked through something worse than death and come out hollow. He reached out once more, his calloused fingers brushing the pup's side. Its fur, if it could still be called that, was coarse and broken, like burnt threads on a ruined fabric. But beneath that, the skin was burning up. Fever, infection, dehydration, all of it. The vultures. They hadn't even waited for death. That thought twisted something deep inside Jack. Deeper than duty. Deeper than anger. It was the feeling that drove him on missions no one else wanted. The same one that had made him kneel beside fallen comrades when others had turned away. It wasn't heroism. It was a refusal to accept that some lives just end in silence. He drove faster than he should, on a road that hadn't seen maintenance in years. The Jeep rattled and shook, the engine protesting the heat, but Jack didn't slow down. He whispered under his breath like a prayer to the desert wind. "Just hold on, kid. Don't quit on me now." Ahead, nothing but more sun-scorched plains and an empty sky. No signal, no towns in sight. His GPS had long since frozen. All he had was the road, the smell of heat-struck metal, and the weight of something fragile beside him. Then, a sign. Wooden, worn, barely legible. Oak Ridge Animal Clinic, 12 miles. Jack's heart kicked. He turned the wheel hard, the Jeep sliding onto gravel, spitting rocks behind them. The puppy stirred. Not a sound, just a twitch of the ear. It was enough. "That's it," Jack whispered. "Stay with me." He drove like a man possessed, dodging potholes and ruts that could have broken an axle. Dust filled the cab, his vision blurred with sweat and sun. But he didn't care, because that ear twitch wasn't nothing. It was choice, a flicker of will. When he finally skidded to a stop outside the squat, weathered clinic, Jack leapt from the Jeep, scooping the limp body into his arms once again. The air was heavier here somehow, thick with antiseptic, hope, and something too quiet to name. The door burst open. A woman in scrubs stepped out, blinking into the dust cloud Jack had brought with him. "What's going on?" she called. Jack didn't answer. Couldn't. His throat had closed around words that didn't matter. Instead, he held out the tiny body, shirt-wrapped, barely breathing. The vultures hadn't taken it. Not yet. "Help," was all he said, and something in his voice made her nod. The clinic doors swung closed behind them with a soft, mechanical click, shutting out the sun and dust. Inside, everything smelled like alcohol wipes, metal, and cold air. But beneath it all was something steadier. Clean, prepared, waiting. Jack laid the bundle on the stainless steel table. His hands hovered longer than they should have, reluctant to let go. The puppy didn't stir, not even when the vet, now gloved and calm, began her quiet examination. "Name's Emily," she said without looking up. "Start for prep. Warm towels. Low heat lamp. We don't have time for full vitals yet." The assistant nurse dashed out. Jack stood motionless, arms crossed, but not to be defiant, only to keep his hands from shaking. Emily placed 2 fingers on the puppy's neck. Her brow furrowed instantly. Too weak. Jack didn't speak. He watched her cut the shirt away with delicate efficiency, revealing the bony frame beneath. Patches of fur were missing, ribs too visible, one back leg already swelling with bruising. Yet the small chest still rose, still fought. She paused, catching sight of something near the inner thigh. "This tattoo." Jack nodded grimly. "Military K-9 program. Her eyes darkened, but she said nothing more. Just worked faster. A small catheter found the puppy's vein. Fluids began to drip, soft beads of hope falling in rhythm. Emily adjusted the towel beneath the limp body, placing a small heating pad under its hips. Jack stepped closer, his voice quiet. "I don't know why, but I couldn't leave him." Emily glanced up, not at his face, but at the spot where his hand now rested lightly on the pup's side. "You saw him," she said. "Some people look. You saw." The drip continued. The machine began its slow, steady beep. A sign, a beat, a chance. Jack stared at the creature on the table, its eyes still shut, but its breathing less ragged. Somewhere in that hollow chest, something was turning, choosing. Emily didn't ask for a name, but Jack gave one anyway, voice almost breaking, as he spoke it aloud. "Valor." She paused, looking at him fully now. "No one's asked that today," she murmured, "but it fits." And in that sterile room, under a heat lamp and a thread of fluorescent light, something passed between soldier and pup. Not noise, not words, just presence. Night began to fall outside, painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and gray. Inside the clinic, time slowed into careful rituals. Machines beeped gently, and the low hum of an old fan filled the silence. Jack hadn't moved far from the table. Emily and her assistant worked in quiet precision, checking reflexes, adjusting the IV drip, applying salve to the bruised leg. But through it all, Jack's gaze remained locked on the pup, as if by watching closely enough, he could will it to live. The puppy didn't make a sound, but every so often, its chest rose with just a bit more rhythm. Its ears would twitch faintly when the air shifted, and when Jack spoke, soft, unsure words, he swore he saw the eyelids flutter. "You're not just a reject," he murmured once, brushing a finger over the edge of one paw. "You were made for something more." No one replied, but he didn't need words. Emily eventually stepped back, peeling off her gloves with a snap. "He's stable, but fragile," she said, voice low. "We won't know until morning what his chances are." Jack nodded. She looked at him carefully. "You staying?" He answered with silence, pulling a plastic chair closer to the table. And so the night unfolded, with stillness. Jack remained beside the steel bed, one arm draped across his lap, the other gently resting near the puppy's paw. He didn't touch, just stayed close enough that Valor could feel the warmth of another body. A soldier trained to charge into chaos now sitting perfectly still, guarding something smaller than hope. Sometime after midnight, the puppy stirred. Barely. Its leg moved half an inch, its ear flicked, Jack's breath caught, and then, the most delicate thing, the tip of a tail twitching just once beneath the blanket. It wasn't random. It was instinct. Not for survival, for trust. Jack closed his eyes, exhaling the breath he'd held all day. The battle wasn't over, but it had begun. Morning crept into the recovery room without sound, slipping soft light across steel and tile. Jack hadn't slept. His body ached, his eyes burned, but he stayed where he was, elbow on his knee, chin resting on his knuckles, watching the slow rhythm of the tiny chest beside him. Valor was still breathing. That was enough to stay. The heat lamp above hummed, casting a gentle glow on the puppy's battered body. Jack leaned forward, just slightly, brushing a stray corner of the blanket away from Valor's face. The dog didn't wake, but its breathing steadied, more even now, less shallow, a victory, small, trembling, but real. Emily entered the room quietly, carrying a small bowl of warmed liquid food and a syringe of vitamins. She didn't speak right away, just watched the two of them, the soldier and the shattered creature who hadn't yet decided to leave. "How long have you been here?" she finally asked. Jack shrugged. "Since he got a name." She smiled, not with amusement, but understanding, the kind of smile that had seen this before, a bond born not from saving, but from needing to save. They worked slowly. Emily held Valor's head upright with a cupped hand, while Jack coaxed the smallest drops of food into his mouth. At first, nothing. Then, a faint tongue movement, a swallow, then another. By the time the bowl was empty, Valor had taken just enough to matter, enough to stay. Jack let out a long breath and leaned back against the wall. His knees were stiff, his shirt rumpled, but something inside him softened for the first time in years. "I've seen brave before," he murmured, watching the dog sink back into sleep. "But this is different." For the hours passed in quiet cycles: clean, feed, rest, observe. Jack didn't leave. He didn't need to. Everything he had to protect was on that table, and as evening came, something happened. Valor moved, not much. A front leg shifted, the nose twitched. Then, without warning, the pup tried to rise, failing almost instantly. His limbs gave out. He collapsed again, panting. But he tried, and Jack, startled, nearly laughed through the lump in his throat. He bent low, his hand hovering near. "No rush," he whispered. "One step at a time, little warrior." In that moment, nothing in the world mattered more than that dog. Not the war Jack had left behind, not the scars he carried in silence. Only this, a being who didn't ask for saving, but chose to fight anyway. The second night was different. Jack didn't stay in the chair this time. He laid a blanket on the floor, right next to the recovery table. No fanfare, no question. He simply curled up on his side, eyes on the slow rise and fall of Valor's chest. Somewhere in the silence, their breathing found rhythm. Sometime past midnight, Valor stirred again. He didn't try to stand, not yet, but his head turned slightly toward the edge of the bed, as if sensing Jack's presence in the dark. Then, with a shaky exhale, he laid it back down on the pillow. That was trust. Jack whispered nothing, just let the quiet hold them both. By morning, something had shifted. The light in Valor's eyes, still dim, carried something unfamiliar. Focus. He watched Emily when she entered, watched Jack when he moved, and when the syringe came close, he didn't flinch. Not as much. "He's watching," Jack said softly. Emily nodded, which means he's deciding. Later, after a few spoonfuls of broth, Valor surprised them both. His tail wagged. It was weak, a barely there flicker against the blanket, but it was voluntary, intentional, and it broke something open in Jack's chest. He placed his hand near the edge of the pillow. Valor leaned his head into it, not because he had to, because he wanted to. On that afternoon, Jack started a notebook, not a military report, not a vet's chart, just a blank page with one word at the top: Valor. Below, he wrote the first entry: held his head up today. Ate 4 spoonfuls. Tail wagged once when I walked in. He didn't know why he wrote it. Maybe to mark progress, maybe to remember, or maybe, just maybe, because every small act meant something when the world had once given up on you. By evening, Valor had shifted closer to the edge of the table, head leaning toward Jack's side. Jack didn't move. He let him lean. That night, for the first time since Fallujah, Jack slept without dreaming. And when he woke, a small paw rested gently against his arm. It began with a twitch. Jack stirred awake just before dawn, the faint light outlining the gentle rise of Valor's side. But the puppy's body was tense, tighter than sleep should be. A leg jerked, then another. Then his entire frame pulled in, trembling like he was bracing against something invisible. "Valor?" Jack whispered, voice still hoarse from sleep. No response. Only a soft whimper. Then a second, sharper, like a cry cut short. Jack sat up fully. The room was still dark, but Valor's breathing came faster now, broken into gasps. His legs kicked wildly, his lips peeled back. Then came the scream, a distorted, raw sound that cut straight through the quiet. Not pain, terror. Jack froze, not in fear, but recognition. He had heard that sound before, in barracks, in night patrols, in his own chest. It was the sound of a mind trapped in memory. "Hey, hey!" Jack crawled close, pressing a hand gently to Valor's back. "It's not real. You're safe." But the dog didn't wake. He thrashed once more, nearly toppling off the pillow. Jack cupped Valor's chest, anchoring him. "You're not there anymore, kid. You're here. I'm here." And then, a jolt. Valor's eyes snapped open, wide and glassy. For a heartbeat, they were lost, darting around the room like he didn't recognize anything. Then they found Jack, and froze, not in fear, in familiarity. Jack didn't speak. He only held still, letting Valor's shallow breathing slow. Eventually, the puppy's head drooped. He slid forward, tucking his nose into the crook of Jack's elbow, shivering in the aftermath. Jack didn't move. He just stayed. Not because he had to, because he knew what it meant to wake up from a place that still had its claws in you. Later that morning, Emily entered with a towel and fresh vitamins. She stopped short at the sight of Valor, curled into Jack like a child, clinging to the last thread of a dream. "He's remembering," she said quietly. Jack didn't look away. Not all of it, just enough to hurt. Emily knelt beside the pair, placing a gentle hand on Valor's back. He didn't flinch, but he didn't lift his head either. He stayed pressed against Jack's chest, still trembling, still not ready to let the world in again. "He's going to have more nights like this," Emily said softly. Jack nodded. "I know." She glanced at him. "So will you." They didn't say anything else for a while. The hum of the heat lamp filled the room. Somewhere down the hall, the faint beep of another monitor echoed like a heartbeat through thin walls. "I've seen this before," she continued. "Shock leaves traces, not just in the body but in the soul. And dogs like him, they don't forget fast." Jack's hand moved in slow circles over Valor's spine. "I don't want him to forget," he whispered. "Just remember differently." Emily stood, leaving behind a fresh blanket and a bowl of warm water. Then be there for every scream, every silence. That afternoon, Jack sat beside the table while Valor slept, still curled tight into himself. He didn't eat, didn't drink, just slept, not peacefully, but protectively, like his own dreams might betray him. Jack picked up his notebook again. He flipped to a blank page, wrote, "Didn't eat today," screamed in his sleep. But when he opened his eyes, he knew me. And that was enough. As the sun dipped again behind the horizon, Jack refused to let the shadows touch the space they'd carved out together. He placed the blanket closer, wrapped Valor gently, and hummed softly. Not a song, just sound. A presence. By nightfall, the puppy had moved again. This time, when his eyes blinked open, they were tired, but not lost. He shifted toward Jack, pressing his paw lightly against the soldier's wrist. And Jack felt it. The answer. Not in words, not in sound, just in weight. The weight of trust returned. The days passed in slow, deliberate rhythm. Every morning Jack would wake before the sun, waiting for the first twitch of paws or flick of an ear. Valor stirred now without panic. His eyes still held shadows, but they no longer darted at every sound. Instead, they searched. For Jack. Healing had no grand announcements, no miracles. It came in flickers. One of those flickers arrived in the form of a knock. A boy stood on the porch. Skinny, maybe 10 years old, holding a cloth bag of milk bottles. He paused when he saw Valor lying beside Jack. "Is he yours?" the boy asked, voice soft but curious. Jack hesitated, then nodded. "His name's Valor." The boy smiled. "Cool name. I'm Ethan. We live up the road. My mom sends milk here." Valor lifted his head slowly. He didn't growl. He didn't back away. He looked. Ethan didn't come closer. He just sat on the porch steps, careful and quiet, letting silence make room. "I used to have a dog," he said. Max. He was old. He went to sleep last spring. Jack glanced at him. The boy wasn't sad, just remembering. Valor sniffed the air. His body stayed still, but his tail gave a faint tap against the floor. A beginning. Ethan came again the next day, this time with a frayed rope toy and a few carrots in his pocket. He might not like toys yet, Jack warned. "That's okay," Ethan said. "He can just watch." And Valor did. From the shade of the porch, he watched as Ethan sat nearby, babbled about school, and left a toy just within reach. By the third visit, Valor had crawled halfway across the porch to sniff Ethan's shoe. By the fourth, he fell asleep with his head resting near the boy's leg. That night, Jack opened his notebook again. Let a child touch him today. Didn't flinch, closed his eyes, stayed there. Progress, written in silence. Not from commands, not from treatment, but from choosing to believe again. The porch became a quiet sanctuary. 2 humans and 1 slowly healing soul, sharing long afternoons beneath the soft rustle of willow leaves. Ethan never pushed. He spoke gently, let Valor sniff his hands, even read aloud from books he brought tucked under his arm. One day, midway through a story about a knight and his loyal dog, Valor did something no one expected. He scooted forward, 1 slow crawl at a time, until his head rested fully on Ethan's lap. The boy froze, wide-eyed, then slowly lowered his hand, letting it rest on Valor's back. A soft stroke, cautious, feather-light, and Valor didn't move, just closed his eyes, ears flicking once, then settling. From the kitchen window, Jack watched. Something tightened in his chest, not pain, something older, like a rusted door creaking open after years sealed shut. And that evening, Valor didn't sleep beside the table. He chose Jack's bed, hopped up slowly, lay down with a sigh, head tucked into the crook of Jack's legs. And Jack, a man who once only slept sitting upright with his boots on, stretched out, arms above his head, heart strangely quiet. No dreams came, only the steady rhythm of another heartbeat beside his own. Later that week, as the sun dipped low and bugs hummed outside, Ethan sat cross-legged with Valor curled up against him. Jack sat nearby, arms folded, notebook forgotten on his knee. "You know," Ethan said suddenly, "I think Max would have liked him." Jack looked up. "Yeah?" The boy nodded. "Max used to be scared too, of loud noises, but he always came to me when I was sad." Jack glanced at Valor, then at Ethan. "You're good at that," he said quietly. Ethan smiled. "So is he." For the first time, Jack didn't feel like a rescuer or a soldier. He felt like something else. A witness. Watching a dog choose to live again. Not because it was told to, not because it was forced to, but because someone small, kind, and gentle gave him space to remember that the world could still be good. The storm came without warning. One minute, the afternoon was calm. Breeze drifting lazily through half-open windows, Valor dozing at Jack's feet. The next, the wind shifted, sharp, wet, wild. Clouds roared in from the west like a memory Jack couldn't quite place, and the sky turned the color of bruises. Jack stood, instinct already taking over. He checked every latch, every door, every container. Valor followed, his paws silent but close, ears flicking toward every creak in the ceiling. "You feel it too, huh?" Jack muttered, grabbing the flashlight. The radio crackled to life. A voice, urgent and mechanical, issued a warning. Severe storm approaching Travis County. Flash floods expected. Seek shelter. Avoid windows. Jack tightened Valor's collar. Not because he was afraid, because he remembered what fear looked like, and Valor had just learned how to feel safe again. He wasn't going to let that slip away. Or the rain hit like artillery. Sheets of water hammered the roof, windows shuttered, and somewhere outside, something cracked. A tree limb? A fence post? Jack couldn't tell. He just knelt beside Valor, pulling a blanket around both of them as the power blinked out. Darkness swallowed the room. Valor whimpered. Just once, but it was enough. Jack wrapped both arms around him, holding tight, whispering steadily, his breath warm against Valor's fur. "It's okay. I've got you. This storm, it's just noise. It can't touch you here." But then, the sound no soldier forgets, a splintering snap, then shattering glass. The back wall exploded inward, a tree slamming through with terrifying force. Debris flew, the air filled with dust and water and sound. Jack shielded Valor with his own body, feeling the sting of glass across his shoulder. But he didn't move, not until everything was still again. They huddled in the hallway, pressed tight between two walls. The floor was slick with water. The cold settled into Jack's bones. Valor didn't shake this time. He pressed his body into Jack's chest and stayed there, trembling, yes, but not breaking. Jack whispered again and again, a steady drumbeat of breath and promise. "I'm here. I'm still here." Because now he knew. It wasn't just about keeping Valor alive. It was about keeping him whole. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky remained heavy, low with clouds, and the air smelled of wet soil and splintered wood. Jack stood barefoot in the wreckage of the back room, his shirt torn, his shoulder grazed with dried blood. The floor was soaked. One wall collapsed inward where the oak had broken through. But none of that mattered, because Valor was alive. The puppy lay curled on a dry patch of blanket, his head tucked under Jack's arm. When the soldier stirred, Valor opened one eye, blinked slowly, and let out a breath that sounded more like peace than fear. Jack exhaled too, not from exhaustion, from the weight that had finally lifted. Emily arrived by noon. She didn't ask what happened. One look at the destroyed room, the dog curled close to the man on the floor, was enough. "I brought bandages," she said, holding up a small kit. "But I think most of the healing's already happening." Jack smiled faintly, brushing a hand over Valor's ears. He didn't run. Not once. "No," Emily said gently, "because he knows you won't." That night, Jack didn't sleep in the bed. He made a new place for them both, a clean spot by the remaining window, where the breeze came soft and cool. Valor lay beside him, tail curled, paws twitching in his dreams. Not nightmares, just dreams. And when Jack finally closed his eyes, it wasn't to forget what came before. It was to rest in what they had now. In the days that followed, the cleanup began. Boards were nailed, glass replaced, roof patched piece by piece. But Jack kept the scratch on his arm uncovered. A reminder, not of pain, but of what he protected. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the repaired window, Jack opened his notebook again. At the top of a new page, he wrote, "Storm hit, tree fell, house cracked." But Valor didn't run. He stayed, and so did I. And below that, in smaller writing, maybe that's what healing really is. Not erasing the past, just learning to survive the next storm, together.